Hello everyone and welcome back to Misconceptions in History, and today we're going to be looking at what is probably the most famous or most important cargo aircraft of World War II, the Douglas DC-3 and its military variant, the C-47 Skytrain. And with more than 16,000 aircraft produced between civilian, military, and license-built copies, it is one of the most produced cargo aircraft of the 1930s and 40s. And because of the sheer volume built during this time frame, there are still hundreds that are not only still available in the world, but are still being used in various industries. So how does an aircraft that started flying more than 80 years ago get to where it's at right now? Let's go ahead and get started. Obviously, if there's a DC-3, we have to talk about a DC-1 and 2 to get to that point. Now, the DC-1 came about for two reasons. One, TWA, Trans World Airlines, needed a new type of aircraft, and they actually couldn't buy it from Boeing because Boeing at the time had an exclusive contract with United Airlines. Additionally, there was a need for an all-metal cargo aircraft because the most popular cargo plane at the time, the Fokker F-10, actually used wooden wings that were laminated together, glued together basically, and they discovered during long trips with bad weather, the planes would become delaminated, the wood would fall apart, and the plane would crash. Douglas Aircraft proposed this aircraft to TWA as a future for their fleet. And Donald Douglas, who owned Douglas Aircraft, didn't think it would even be a success, but TWA absolutely fell in love with it, and they kind of ran with the one and only aircraft they built. And it would actually be sold to multiple smaller airlines. They all got a test of it, and they actually really enjoyed it, but the whole project was abandoned when the DC-1 crashed, and no others were built to replace it. Now, instead of building more DC-1s, instead Douglas built the DC-2. And the DC-2 was basically a slightly longer, more powerful version of the DC-1, capable of carrying 14 passengers as opposed to the DC-1's 12 passengers. Now, the design was so popular and worked so well that they actually became popular in places like the Netherlands and Japan. And nearly 200 of these aircraft would end up being built by 1939 when production ended. So if the DC-2 was so popular, why did we even build the DC-3? Well, that all comes down to one airline, American Airlines. American Airlines wanted to replace their Curtiss Condor, which they were using for long-distance flights. And at the time, when they flew long-distance, you actually were expected to sleep on board. So, American Airlines CEO C.R. Smith talked to Donald Douglas and convinced him to build an even larger version of the DC-2 in which he could have 14 to 16 sleeping berths on board the aircraft for people to sleep in. Now, Douglas Aircraft agreed to go ahead and design and build this new aircraft after American Airlines agreed to purchase from them for the next 20 years. Now, this new aircraft was actually 33 inches wider, longer, and had even more powerful engines than the DC-2 to handle the additional weight load. And thus, the DC-3 is born. And this aircraft became extremely popular with the air travel industry. The DC-3 actually was faster at cross-country travel than the DC-2, cutting a travel across the United States by 3 hours, taking it from 18 to 15. And while the DC-3 was extremely popular, especially for its luxuries like heated interiors, noise-reducing cabins, it was the military variant, the C-47, that would really showcase its capabilities. Now, the C-47 was essentially a DC-3 that had been stripped down on the interior. The heated interior, the noise-canceling features, all those wonderful things that had been part of the DC-3 were removed. Instead, a large cargo door was installed on it, and the interior was stripped to make it better for transporting troops or equipment. Now, while only 607 civilian versions, the DC-3, were ever built, 10,000 C-47s were built for the Allies. And this aircraft would see action in every theater of war and would be used everything from a troop transport, cargo aircraft, paratrooper carrier, used to tow gliders, and even used as a cargo parachute drop aircraft. And they even attempted to convert the aircraft into a glider itself. They built one prototype. It worked way beyond expectations. However, there was just no need for a glider that size. Additionally, the Japanese built 500 of their own licensed copies of the DC-3, and they bought the license, of course, before World War II began, and this was actually the most important cargo aircraft, sheer numbers-wise, for the Japanese. Additionally, there was nearly 5,000 Soviet-made DC-3s built under the licensing name of the Lusanov Li-2. Now, the end of World War II didn't spell the end for the DC-3. It continued to see service in both the civilian and military world. One major upgrade that appeared was known as the DC-3S, also known as the Super DC-3. This was a completely modified and upgraded DC-3 that included a longer fuselage, completely redesigned wings, the ability to handle more powerful engines that were nearly 1,500 horsepower apiece. While it saw limited usage as a passenger aircraft, it became extremely popular for the cargo industry. It was used such as people living out in the bush in extremely Arctic conditions. It's very popular in Arctic and Antarctic environments to this day. In terms of military service, it continued service around the world. It was extremely popular during the Berlin airlift, but more importantly, it got a big role during the Vietnam War, where the aircraft would be modified as a fixed-wing gunship to provide close-in air support during the Vietnam War. Now, this version of the aircraft is more commonly known as the Spooky, a name that carries on today into its legacy with the C-130 Spooky Spectre gunships. If you'd like to know more about those aircraft, I do have a video I have made a while back about those aircraft. Now, while the DC-3 is a very popular museum piece, as seen here at the Lone Star Flight Museum, it has actually gone beyond that. While there are plenty of examples of DC-3 still being used as cargo aircraft, one company has taken it to the next level. The Basler BT-67 is a completely upgraded C-47. It basically takes the C-47's airframes and adds in new avionics, upgrades the airframe, lengthens the fuselage, changes the leading edge of the wings, and adds turboprop engines, something that was kind of relatively experimented with in the 50s and 60s. This newly upgraded version of the C-47, the BT-67, actually is being used by air forces around the world, more popular in places like South America and Southeast Asia, where it is actually being used as a gunship by the Air Forces of Colombia. Additionally, it is used by civilian agencies, such as the United States Forest Service, the Canadian North Star Aviation, Australian Antarctic Division, all use variants of the BT-67. Because of this, it is very likely that we will see airframes of the C-47s that were built in the 40s and 50s and such go well beyond a full century of service. But there we have it, a quick look at the DC-3, C-47, an aircraft whose history surpasses 80 years and more than likely will surpass more than a century of service around the world. And it's an amazing tale for an aircraft that started off as a passenger aircraft, went and did some amazing military service, became a passenger cargo aircraft again, and even returned to military service as a gunship. But that's it for today. If you would like to learn more about gunships, I do have a whole video on that. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you all the next time.